Go ahead.
Is Kai Sandberg and Byrne and Liz Lafferty on the line?
Lynn Lafferty, I know I heard from. Steve Bernheim is also here.
And Kai Sandburn?
Not that I see at this particular moment. If you'd
or
like.
Chome?
Excuse me, ma'am. We need to get the meeting started. If you
Sure,
would like
thank
to
you.
contact those people and see if you can get them to go on, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm opening the Planning Commission meeting for San Juan County Planning Commission on Friday, August 21st at 8:39. The planning commissioners present are by phone are Tim Blanchard, David Kane, Mike Pickett, Steve Ruby, and myself, Camille Euler. Dale Randy has been excused from the meeting. I'd like to ask if there are any changes to the agenda. Hearing none, we will proceed with the agenda. And the first item will be a report from Erica Shook, DCD Director.
Good morning, everybody. You will also have to do the minutes after I'm done. Today we have a really full agenda, and we have put some controversial topics on towards the end that we've needed to discuss for the comprehensive plan. Our idea was not to have you complete discussion. Our idea for this meeting was sort of to brief you and get the issues out there and the possible solutions. And what I would suggest is let us do the briefing on it, and then you can decide how many topics you want to talk about, in what order, and which ones you would like to put off until September. So, just for today. Let's see, building activity in the county and nationwide, as you've probably noticed, is still chugging right along. We are still very busy. A couple of projects you'll want to be aware of. We have a boutique hotel proposed on Main Street in East Sound. It's become very controversial. It has a hearing before the hearing examiner next Wednesday. Folks are very concerned about environmental issues and sort of the size and scale of the development. It's a redevelopment of an existing site. The other thing of issue of note is there are a lot of property owners on Waldron who have obtained permits to log from the State Department of Natural Resources, and it's quite a lot of logging, and it's become very controversial on Waldron. All of the logging that happened or is happening is outside of shoreline jurisdiction, so it doesn't require a permit from the county. The only permit we've granted in that's also been controversy is a barge landing for the logs at an existing barge landing site. And this has actually prompted some changes to the SMP that I'll also give you an update on. So let's see. On Tuesday, Council will be hearing the marijuana regulations that you recommended. So far, the only change they've recommended is adding the Lopez Village use matrix into the ordinance to make it so folks don't have to go to two different tables in Lopez Village. So we expect that will be moving right along on Tuesday. The Shoreline Master Program, they heard it, let's say on the 28th. We've brought back some proposed changes for them. What they've done is added a process by which existing non-conforming temporary barge landings, these are the ones that are not permanent, are required, they're required to do provide notice to the county before they do a barge landing. So we have to create a process for that. And then we have been tasked with creating a list of existing temporary non-conforming barge landing sites. So that's what.
This is Tim Blanchard. I just reconnected. I'm sorry. I don't know when I got disconnected, so I apologize.
Okay.
That's okay. Thank you, Tim.
Anyway, the process for the SMP at this point is our locally recommended SMP has now been sent off to Ecology. Ecology will review it and our response to all the comments, and they'll tell us whether or not we need to make any changes to it. And if once we'll have one last hearing to adopt the SMP formally as a locally adopted SMP after Ecology has reviewed it. And then we will submit it for final approval. And once it's finally approved by Ecology, it becomes effective 30 days after that. So it's probably a couple months out. So that's what I've got for you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have questions, commissioners, of Erica at this time? If not, we'll go back, and I skipped over approving the minutes of July 17th, which you have all received. And I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
This is Tim. I move we approve the minutes of July 17th.
Is there a second?
This is Mike Pickett. I second that.
Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, all those in favor, Tim Blanchard.
Aye.
Corrections or additions to the minutes? I'm sorry, David, I didn't. All those in favor, Tim Blanchard.
Aye.
Corrections or additions to the minutes? I'm sorry, David.
I'm getting this, Mike. I'm getting terrible feedback. But I approve.
If you are not part of the meeting, would you please, at this point, would you please mute your microphone or your computer? We're getting feedback, so somebody's trying to listen while we're going on. At this point, would you please mute?
This is Steve Ruby, and I'm getting terrible
We're
feedback.
getting feedback, so somebody's trying to listen while we're going on. At this point, would you please mute?
This is Steve Ruby, and I'm getting terrible
We're
feedback.
getting feedback, so somebody's trying to listen while we're going on.
Anyhow, I approve the minutes.
Thank you. Oh, somebody did something.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, let's try this again. Tim Blanchard was a yes. David King?
Yes.
I couldn't.
David Kane, yes.
Mike Pickett, I heard yes. Steve Ruby? Yes.
Yes.
David King? Fuller, yes.
David Kane, yes.
Mike Pickett, I heard yes. Steve Ruby?
Yes.
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 David King? Fuller, yes. We are
Very
beset by technical difficulties this morning. All right, public access time. Is there anyone online from the public who would like to speak at this time?
The first name, ask for Julianne Patel.
Julianne Battelle, are you on the line, and would you care to speak now?
She even contacted me yesterday. Julianne, you need to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak during public access this morning. Okay, let's go to the next.
Who do you show us next?
I don't have everybody. Lynn, is it Lynn Lafferty?
Liz Lafferty.
How about Marilyn O'Connor?
Marilyn O'Connor. Steve Bernheim.
This is Liz Lafferty.
Liz. Okay.
Lots of techno difficulties on this one, so,
Yes.
but glad to be here. Do you want me to, and Julianne is here, so I don't know, it's the *6. The unmute button on the phone doesn't work. So for those of us who aren't familiar with Skype.
Well, we'll circle back to Julianne. If you'd like to go ahead, Liz, with your comments, that would be great.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And we did send a letter over. I'm going to read this brief letter, and you all should also have a copy of it. So let me go ahead. We have great respect and appreciation for all the years of effort that individuals and groups have already put into drafting a thoughtful, comprehensive plan. But that draft was written before the pandemic altered our lives. Things are different now. Before the pandemic, one set of truths informed and guided us. We could not know what we did not know. Now we understand that many of our most foundational beliefs miss the mark, harm large numbers of people, and imperil species. Because this pandemic continues to upend everything, we must rethink the guiding language of our vision statement. We believe the language of the comp plan must reflect the lessons of this time. In the enforced slowdown of COVID-19, the privilege of being able to call this place home has never been more clear. We have experienced the shared vulnerability of our food supply, medical care, and our economic fragility. We have come to understand what we call rural character is more than a mere aesthetic value. It is a lived relationship. We now know the importance of our forest for all they provide beyond the value of timber taken, as they are protectors of vital water cycles and home to many, many species. The interrelationship of orca, salmon, and eelgrass has become visible. If we care deeply about the orca, we must care deeply about eelgrass and the communities of forage fish that live there. Now is the time to be courageous and to be bold. Let us ask, what could possibly go right? Not wrong, but what could go right? What must go right to carry us forward into 2036? With respect and civility, we must take what we are learning and apply it to the comprehensive plan. Our future depends on our ability to learn from history, adapt to the present, and boldly plan for what lies ahead. For our grandchildren and theirs, let us envision and plan for what can and must go right. A growing number of community groups are working on changes we believe must be included in the vision statement. In September, we will send you a draft of our proposed changes and rationale for suggesting them. In the meantime, we welcome your questions and look forward to working together. Respectively, Community Rights San Juan Islands. So thank you for your time, and we are eager to stay connected and see in what ways the language needs to reflect the lessons of this time.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate your comments.
This is Tim Blanchard. Could I ask just a follow-up question? I read this, and the problem we have is today we're not at a hearing stage or anything, of course, so there's time, certainly, but we're in the process of working through a number of the other elements to the comprehensive plan update, and in doing so, frequently make reference to the vision statement that was updated and adopted last year. So I'm curious what areas you anticipate suggesting changes in, so that we have some ability to at least have in mind what may be coming, so that we're not having to reduce or redo or redouble, or anyway. I don't know whether I'm making any sense, but my problem is I'm trying to figure out what's changed.
Tim,
in the vision for how we want.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
So, Tim, I appreciate that question. It's a great question, and I'll only be able to answer it partially. So there are people who are looking at the ag conversation, people who are looking at the transportation, energy and transportation conversation, and just the overall tenor of the vision statement to reflect, it is a different world. And from our perspective, to not look at that, and I understand, I truly respect the amount of effort that's gone into it, and that this is not an easy ask. But there's a group of people out there that are just saying it makes no sense that the language we had 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, and 5 years ago, when this process started, do not represent the world that we're now living in and what we now know. So I don't know. I invited people from those groups to be on this call, and there's a lot of techno difficulties, so I don't know if they've made it on. But that's not much of an answer, Tim. I get that, but that's the best I have for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll get our letter over to you as early in September as we can, because we understand that this feels like going backwards, but I just don't believe, and many of us don't believe, that the language any longer reflects the world we've come to know at this point.
Well, I realize this is probably comment time, but let me just maybe explain so that you can understand what my question had to do with it. My understanding of your comment is that you think that the vision statement needs to be changed. The vision statement's designed to identify the community's vision for where we want to be during the planning horizon, the community we want to have, as opposed to the rules and regulations and the underlying goals and policies in the plan to try to get us there. So I guess what I'm understanding is you think we have a different vision, or should have a different vision, of the community we want ours to be as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's what I was trying to figure out, what would change in the way we wanted our community to be.
Yes, and that will come in the letters we send.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there other people that want to speak during public access time? Julian Battelle, are you able to join us?
Ask her to try the *6.
It's been suggested that to unmute, you try *6. Is there anyone else that's been able to come on? Steve Bernheim, I think you were on at one point.
I'm just listening in. This is the method I'm attending the meeting. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Thanks.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
The director, Erica Shook, unmuted you on the computer. So go ahead. The computer.
Okay, well, this is Julian Battaglia, and I wanted to just express my support for Liz's letter and let you reiterate the fact that we have been working hard with other groups with the language of the vision statement, and it's and that will be submitted in September. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Julianne. Are there other members of the public who would like to participate?
This is Level Pratt. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Level.
Is this a good time to provide comments?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. So, good morning, Planning Commissioners. I want to be sure that you've all received the comments that I submitted, and just urge you to, and this is in regard to the land use and rural element, also the staff briefing on accessory dwelling units and rural residential clusters. And was that distributed?
Yes, well,
Yes.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to kind of highlight some of those comments and just say that, you know, in this, and also just to share appreciation for the previous people who spoke. It has been a long process that this update has been going on, and in fact, sometimes I found for myself when I was preparing comments on the land use and rural element, I'd almost lost track of the fact that there was the analysis done on resource lands a couple of years ago, and what a difference that makes in terms of you know, this current element. And so I tried to highlight some of those concerns in the comments. But I think that in this update, some of the language that the staff is proposing to remove articulates the challenges that San Juan County has faced with, at the time that we entered into planning under the Growth Management Act, there was already quite a bit of subdivision that had occurred in our rural areas that had created lots that were of a much smaller size than is typical for the rural area. And that is one component that has challenged the county in its ability to retain its rural character in the rural lands. And since the last comp plan update, I tried to articulate, you know, some other challenges that the county has been facing, and that's made it even more difficult to retain the rural character in our rural lands. And so I think this is a really important opportunity for the county to evaluate where we are in a very honest and you know, not at all Pollyannish way, but just to really see where we are, and also recognize that this is an opportunity to establish our priorities and you know, set a path for how we want to grow into the future. And if it's important to retain the rural character that we have, and to even you know, to protect and even restore it where that's possible, then this is the opportunity to do that. So I want to thank you for bearing with this process, and appreciate all the work that you're doing. And I'm going to be here this morning if I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lovell. Are there other members of the public who would like to comment at this time?
Marilyn O'Connor has her microphone open.
Okay, Marilyn O'Connor, would you like to speak?
Kai Sandburn?
Kai Sandburn?
No, thank you. Actually, I will just say something. I am part of the group that submitted the letter that Liz Lafferty wrote. And we would be happy to talk to any of the planning commissioners prior to the next September meeting to flesh out some of our thoughts and ideas about that language. We do not intend to blindside you with that. So, you know, we'd be happy to talk to you and let you know more about what we're describing. Thank you very much.
Was that
That was Kai Sandburn.
Okay.
Are there other members who would like to share their comments at this time?
There's one that's on that just says wireless caller, and their microphone is open.
Would that be Marilyn O'Connor or someone else?
No, that's a separate name from Marilyn.
All right. Wireless caller, would you please identify yourself?
Yep.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right. Thank you all for sharing your comments with us this morning. And at this time, we'll close public access time with the right to reopen. Next, excuse me. Next on the agenda is the briefing and the scheduling of the September 18th public hearing on the draft 6-year transportation improvement program, also known as TIP. Colin, are you with us this morning? Good morning, Colin.
Colin's here, yes.
Please proceed.
Just a moment. Well, good morning, Planning Commission members. I'm Colin, County Public Works Engineer and Director, and I'm here to talk to you about the 6-year Transportation Improvement Plan, an annual programmatic resolution that comes before you on its way to the Council ultimately for adoption. I handed off a packet of materials that I believe you've had before you now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm happy to go through that, and I also have a presentation that I shared with the County Council, and I'm happy to share that with you too. So let me see if I can get that on my screen. So I have shared my screen, and if someone could confirm that you can see it. Yes. And that might not be available to all commission members who are probably just dialing in by phone. So,
well, they probably have the printed material in front of them, but can anyone of the commissioners see the slide that Colin has put on?
Yeah, David Kane here. I can see it. I'm on Skype on my phone, and it's working great.
Okay. Well, okay. Thanks, David.
Okay.
All right, go. Please
so this was presented to the council earlier this year, and what I'm going to do is go through the county's 6-year transportation plan from last year to give you an update on progress we made and projects, and that will help set the stage for your consideration of next year's 6-year TIP. So we have the Pearpoint Turnpoint Connector Road project. That was opened on July 1st of this year. We still have some small work we're doing with fencing and the Island Rec has some concerns about their future use of the property for pedestrian access. So, but the road is open to traffic, and that was a major goal for the project. And with the completion of that, that project will be dropped from the 6-year TIP. Upper Deer Harbor Road improvements has been on the tip for a while. That's will complete parking and circulation in Deer Harbor. The funding has been secured for a number of years. We have a preliminary design, but COVID and staffing issues and other priorities on the program have reallocated some staffing resources. So that project is on hold right now. Aggie Beach County Park, that's a joint effort with the Bureau of Land Management in Western for the National Monument, and it involves a number of issues regarding Iceberg Point, an eroding bluff, parking, shore access, and the county has partnered with federal agencies on this project, and that one is progressing. We were expecting a 30% design in July, and maybe that'll come anytime. And As the project scope is refined, we'll get reassess where we are with some of the goals, including with funding. Prune Alley road improvements has received a lot of attention in East Sound. That's one of the few projects where we have consolidated staffing resources behind to support it. We've had a number of challenging issues with utilities and frontage improvements with lots that have completed buildings. But we hope to actually start construction on phase 1 on that project in the first quarter or second quarter of next year.
2021.
2021, correct. Beaverton Valley Road culvert. That's another project that's being put on hold because of COVID staffing delays and other issues. So it'll remain on the tip, and we'll look to push that one out a couple years. Douglas Baylor Hill, a project on San Juan Island. And again, you should be able, for those who can't see this, all these, many of these projects are in the staff report that was provided to you. Douglas Baylor Hill is a project on San Juan Island to add shoulders carrying around and up the hill through False Bay. That project has received some funding, and we will keep it on the tip and carry it forward. A Street Road Improvements is a project that has not had any funding. It was allocated towards it. We don't have a project schedule or even a preliminary design. So we are recommending that that project be dropped from the tip until it can be better defined.
I'm sorry, Colin, which project was that? The San Juan Valley Road Improvement?
No, I was talking about number 7 on my slide here. This says A Street Road Improvements. And I'm going to see if I can bring this. It doesn't get any bigger. Maybe that will help. Haven Road pedestrian improvements is a sidewalk in East Sound that has also been completed this year. We still have some landscaping to do. We're going to plant some trees. There's been discussions about possibly opportunities to put in plantings and art and maybe a bench. Rouleau Road, another project on San Juan Island that we haven't had funding for. There's no schedule been developed, and until that project is better defined, we're recommending it be dropped off the tip. San Juan Valley Road, a very worthy project on this island here, San Juan. But again, looking to secure funding, and possibly we'll get some staff available to work on it after we work on Upper Deer Harbor Road. Center Road improvements. That's a possible grant-funded project from the state, but it would follow Douglas Baylor. We'll keep that on there for now. There's 3 intersection-related projects that have been hanging out in the tip for a long time without scope or funding. We just did an intersection improvement project on Lopez, and I think that one was pretty successful in-house, and there might be an opportunity to look at doing some of these ones as emergent capital projects with county forces, and I think we'll be more successful doing it that way than putting it on the tip. So recommending to council that we drop these 3. Orcas Landing Marine Facility. There's been a renewed interest from council to complete our infrastructure there. We've if those of you who have been to Orcas recently have probably seen that we've been doing some site amenities, some art, and benches down there where the old fuel tanks have been. But there's some sidewalk and parking improvements needed up on the road. Council has asked that we accelerate that project. Hunter Bay is another one that Council has asked that we accelerate due to deteriorating conditions with the float in particular, which broke away a number of years ago during a winter storm. West Sound Marine Facility, that one can stay there too. That's in on Orcas Island. We did some gravel road conversions here on San Juan Island this year, Three Corner Lakes Road. That one turned out very nicely. There's not many gravel roads left as county roads here on San Juan. There's a few smaller ones on the north end near Yacht Haven. There's a few gravel roads on Lopez Island and a few on Orcas. I'm working with the operations team to figure out their recommendations and then to bring those forward to council. But gravel road conversions are always something that is available depending on public requests or council needs. Lopez Road Trail has been on the tip as a capital project, but it's another project that we're looking to do possibly with county forces. In fact, we had a site walkthrough, I believe, yesterday on that one. And similar to the trail that's being built on Fisherman Bay Road, we'll look to improve the Lopez Road Trail through the village. And so we can drop it off the tip. Channon Forest Road Trail, hoping to break ground on it this year, but because the scope of it now is a sidewalk based off of recommendations from EPRC and its proximity to the East Sound Swale, there are some challenges for permitting, so we won't be able to do any work this year until we resolve those environmental constraints. Lovers Lane Trail and Crescent Beach Road Trail. Two other projects will remain on the tip. We haven't had staff to work on them. And then Pear Point Shoulder widening here on San Juan Island. Also being challenged, but it's possible we could get some work done this year. Fisherman Bay Road shoulder widening. Again, non-motorized transportation projects. All of these. We've been working on that one in phases, and those of you on Lopez have probably seen some of the efforts of that, and that will continue. Orcas Road Multimodal Improvements is a funny name for, again, another pedestrian improvement project as you head into East Sound on Orcas Road, turning into Main Street. There was a mooring buoy feasibility study done for the entire county, and that was completed earlier this year, and I can make that study available. It's actually something probably we should post on our website, but it's just a planning document identifying areas where the county could put in public mooring buoys around the county. So there's a lot of red lines on the tip from last year. It's a mix of projects which were completed, which are success stories. There's some other projects which have, for lack of a better term, languished here because of lack of scoping or funding. And so we're recommending that those get dropped so that we can focus on the projects that remain on here. The road fund, like some of the other funds in the county, is stressed recently because of reduced revenues and fuel taxes, and particularly the $30 car tab initiative from last year. So there's a lot of financial pressures on the road fund, and then of course COVID, like every other government function here, has stressed staffing resources, and we are looking to consolidate our efforts around a number of priority projects. And that's what reflects before you with the strikeouts, the blue arrows meaning projects that are going to be pushed forward, the green arrows meaning projects that are going to be accelerated. And I think that can take me into the staff report, which you all have. It shows adoption calendar for the transportation programs for 2020. Here we are on August 21st. This is the first time the Planning Commission's reviewing this. I'm going to take any feedback that I received today and share it with Council on Tuesday, August 25th. The Planning Commission and Council will again hear all these materials, have a chance to comment them after further consideration in the second or third week in September. And then we'll move into adoption in October. The rest of it, the packet before you shows a draft version of the 2021 program. And there's 20 projects on it total, which is further described in individual project summaries 1 through 20 in the packet. So what's the ask today? Planning Commission reviews this material and the county's 6-year transportation program. As mentioned in the staff report, the purpose of this is to, I think this is verbatim, but the Planning Commission is reviewing it for consistency with the goals and policies of the county's comprehensive plan. And of course, that's being revised right now. But we want to make sure that what we're doing on the ground as public works for improvements, this is a chance for the Planning Commission to share its thoughts and recommendations to the council so that they can ensure that this program is consistent with the county's transportation program.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I'm going to ask for comments and questions from the commissioners, and I'll begin with Tim Blanchard.
This is Tim. Thanks, Colin, for that update. And it's good to see that this is nothing in here was unexpected to me, of course, since we've gone through this before and had the briefing earlier in the year. I have a question though. That is suggested different than some of what I've suggested before. I appreciate your attention and to the question of how projects work out on the ground. And obviously, as we've discussed in other settings and regarding prior tips, the challenge that I think we'll be trying to get into in the transportation element is that you can't really tell from the descriptions that are available in the tip, and I'm not suggesting we change that. I'm just suggesting that it's clear to folks that just because a project in the tip is there and has been looked at several times, it doesn't mean that the Planning Commission or anybody else who's reviewed it for that matter has any idea what effect it's going to have on rural character, because that depends on the implementation. And sometimes what looks like a great idea turns out not to feel like such a great idea when it's actually done because of some of the engineering requirements or design decisions. So that's just a comment that I think needs to be kept in front of mind. That wasn't my question, though. I'm sorry. I had two thoughts in my head at the same time. That was my comment in terms of making sure the council remains cognizant of that, and I wanted to thank you for your attention to that. Not a criticism, a thanks. The question I have though is in number 12, the Enchanted Forest Road Trail. There's other places it is, but this is one place where it comes up. The project under project need in the summary, it says work with EPRC to develop street standards for this section of Enchanted Forest Road. And I agree that EPRC should be involved in developing those things, but my question is, what's the process for adopting those standards? Because that seems like something that somehow manages to bypass the Planning Commission and something that needs to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan if we're going to carry out the other goals of the plan. But I'm not really sure. I'm asking a question. What is the process for developing and adopting, more important, the adopting of those street standards?
This is Colin here. This project was brought to our program because EPRC submitted and received a grant for the design and construction of it. And so because EPRC applied for the grant and listed Public Works as essentially their agent for making sure that the work got done, they have been leading the design effort. So, I mean, I want to make sure that that was understood. So EPRC applied for the grant, designated Public Works as the person responsible for doing the work. So we are taking direction from EPRC regarding what they envisioned and what they would like done for this project. Was the question that now should be turned over to the Planning Commission? I'm not quite sure.
Well, no, I mean, I was just wanting to get the process because the EPRC and the Planning Commission are advisory bodies to the county, but it seems very difficult to work on a comprehensive plan if there are other organizations drafting essentially street standards, because particularly when we're charged with protecting the character of the community. And that's a big focus of comments we've received throughout the comprehensive plan update process. To me, this is not news to anybody, but the greatest impact on the character of a community is driven by its roads and driven by the nature of its public works. And so I can't think of anything that is more important to protecting character than something like a street standard. And yet, this seems like something that, in practice, has been removed from the Planning Commission's process. And I just want to understand what the process is. Because historically, other than in reviewing an update to the sub-area plan, which does not include this, I don't think, for these sections. That's not the way the East Sound plan has evolved. So these things are still out there to be involved on an ad hoc basis. So what I'm trying to get at is a question. It seems as though we should have a centralized process so that those things are consistent with each other and consistent with the character we're supposed to be protecting. So that's why I want to know what the process actually is. Erica, do you know?
One moment, Tim.
And before Erica responds, I guess I should clarify, Tim, this was project-specific design standard for Enchanted Forest Road, the project that EPRC applied for and received grant for. They're not looking to design a standard for the whole village. They're looking to figure out what they wanted on Enchanted Forest Road. So maybe that was the confusion, is that we're not doing a set of road standards that are going to be adopted or codified or carried forward for another project. This was this, and maybe that's a poor choice of words, but they're just telling me, the Public Works Department, what kind of design they would like to see on Enchanted Forest Road for this specific project, not adopting a road standard.
Right, but that essentially means that we're contemplating doing a transportation project without a standard, without a standard developed based on comprehensive plan principles. So in a sense, this is even worse than where we are with the implementation of the Scenic Roads Manual, because we're just asked EPRC what it wants to do for this segment. So that's not comprehensive in any sort of way. If that's what the plan is, that would allow. Well, I'm just trying to get a handle on what we can do, perhaps in the transportation element, to get a handle on things. Because once it's done as a practical matter, and things are hard to undo.
Erica, would you like to respond in terms of?
This is Erica, and I don't know that there's an actual code process for all of the street standards in the county. I do know in East Sound, the street standards were adopted as drawings in the sub-area plan, and there is a process spelled out for if you're going to vary from those drawings, and it's a street standard that's approved by council. And that's in 1830, 700E, I think is it's in 1830.
Okay, so that's sort of what I thought it might be, but I wasn't sure. So in that respect, it is disconnected. It just means that the EPRC develops something, takes it to council, they adopt it, and is there a check in that process as to any set of goals and policies under the comprehensive plan? Is there a check there? I don't think there's even been a process, as long as I've been on the Planning Commission, to look at that, other than in the sub-area plan review that was rushed through a few years ago. And we didn't even have a chance to look at that issue. Unlike, for example, the process that Lopez has had, in which very detailed aspects of the elements of the design and the standards for paths and other development projects within Lopez Village came to the Planning Commission, and there wasn't a lot to say about it because it all looked good. But the point is, we had a chance to look at it. We knew what it was, as opposed to project-specific development of project-specific street standards based on a grant. So I'm wondering. I think I've got my answer. I think we need to do something in the transportation element that changes that process, so that there's a check on it, other than the county council. I mean, before it gets to the county council.
I agree with you, Tim. I think otherwise it becomes sort of piecemeal. But are there other commissioners who would like to weigh in on this issue? David?
Yeah, David Kane here. Yeah, I agree with Tim. In the sense that while this project and the design may in fact be excellent, we don't know. We don't have a check and balance to understand if it's really consistent with the comprehensive plan, and that sort of brings to light that we probably should have more checks and balances throughout all aspects, whether it's transportation or any other project that goes through. Or were we looking back to the comprehensive plan frequently enough to make sure we're being consistent and realizing our vision? That's it for me.
Michael?
Yeah, I understand what Tim's getting at in comments. I'm just, I guess I just wonder the link between the comp plan and actions that the county takes should be strong enough that somewhere in this process, actions that are proposed to be taken are held up against the plan, and someone's responsible for that. So it's creating, and so I guess in a way I agree. In this particular case, I wonder about other things other than road design. But anyway, yeah, I agree.
Steve Ruby? He may not be on at the moment.
We have his name.
Okay. All right. Are there additional questions of Colin?
Well, first, this is Tim. Just let me say thanks. That's all that I had, and I didn't mean to present it But anyway, this is helpful. That's what I needed to know. So thanks very much. And again, it didn't have so much to do with this particular project as in my mind right now is the larger issue. This is a project that is interesting though because it is going to require some urbanizing factors of buried culverts and things like that, and a sidewalk approach as you had described as I took away from our discussion of this when we had our briefing earlier this year, because of the roadside ditch drainage that exists there presently. So that's just one of those things that I think will be surprising to a lot of people. So anyway.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
I have a question, Colin, about the Douglas Baylor Hill Road improvement, that area just past False Bay Drive that is subject to flooding in the winter. I know it's mentioned that there's some degradation of the road on the south side, but I mean, the flooding is fairly persistent. So are there other actions that people have in mind as to how to correct that? Or
this is Colin. The project is to certainly address the flooding problems of the road, primarily just by raising the road and ensuring that the culvert underneath the road is free and unobstructed. There are a number of other entities who are looking at the watershed holistically for environmental restoration, including all the way up to Zylstra Lake. So we'll be communicating with those entities, the Land Bank, the Preservation Trust, other environmental groups. But in addition to making sure that the road doesn't flood, we will also add shoulders to the road for non-motorized transportation, walkers and bikers. That's the two primary goals of this: safety. I guess it's safety in two flavors: safety of flooding and safety for non-motorized transportation uses.
And my other question was your comment on the Pearpoint shoulder widening. You said challenge. Is there a legal challenge to the widening, or it's just challenged because of the funding and workforce availability?
Yeah, the challenges on Pearpoint from Argyle to the gravel pit. It's not a funding challenge. It's a design challenge. If you were to go out there, and I'm happy at any time, any of the commissioners can call me individually or ask to walk a job with me or get more information. So I just want to make that overture out there that I'm certainly available outside of these meetings to give more information on a project-specific basis. But on this project in general, if you were to walk it, we are pinched on the north side by a very steep embankment and a deep ditch, and on the other side, road drops off and there's fences and utilities and power poles and driveways, and behind all that is a very complex road right-of-way issue that needs to be resolved. That, as is often the case in many of our county roads, as they developed over 150 years, sometimes there's discrepancies between the legal paper right-of-way and the road that exists on the ground, and resolving those can sometimes be a challenging thing for adjoining property owners who, by all accounts, had an expectation that the right-of-way was represented by the physical location of the road and not something else that can only be seen by a survey of legal descriptions that are very, very old. So there's right-of-way challenges, and those need to be resolved. And then how we, to Tim's point about rural character, we want to make sure I think people who have been asking for non-motorized transportation improvements there just want a safe walking trail. But how do you do that without just widening the road, which is really what we're trying to do, is to create a trail that's not just widening the road, but again, you need the trail to be separated the road somehow, which creates more space, and the more space you create, the more challenges you have for design. And you're right, at a top level, when you're looking at reviewing these projects and you got 20 projects before you and you got goals and policies, how those are implemented on a project-specific basis and I think you're not going to be able to get all the way there in a meeting like this. But I'm open for improvements to how you want to be better engaged on this. But this is certainly an opportunity now to answer to other Tim's question. This is certainly an opportunity now to make your opinions known about these projects and what your concerns are related to the goals and policies. I mean, this is the process. I'm here before you now. I'll be here before you again in 3 weeks. And if you think there are certain elements that need more attention because it's impossible to make a decision now, then find a way to request this information come back before you or reach out individually. Happy to share information.
Well, I think retaining rural character is very important. Obviously, safety is a concern too. Commissioners, how would you like to ask Colin to respond to our concerns, or what would you like to have him bring back at the September? Tim?
Well, I think one of the main things that comes up, and as we learned in the, at least I hope we learned in the Orcas Road project, one of the main things people want to understand is the degree to which trees need to be removed for a project. And I think between those aspects of the project and the aspects of anything that would involve a curb or a guardrail or something like that is something that the public would want to know about, so they could at least comment on it. Now, I'm not saying that those things are always bad, and in many cases they will be necessary given the topography and other design factors, but a lot of what we want to be doing is making sure the public understands that we are listening to this and trying to apply the standards. And I'm thinking of this as much for the benefit of public works as well, to make sure they understand that you're doing what I actually think you are doing, which is trying to apply what right now we collectively need to do a better job of. But that's a transportation element issue, squaring those things away. But I think what people would want to know on a number of these projects is how many trees have to go to make that path. And more important than that, what's it likely to look like after that? It's not necessarily how many trees, but will there be trees left? And what's the spacing? How's it going to appear to people? Because that drives the character just too many. And so that's one of the things that does not come across necessarily in the way that the tip is presented. And I understand the issue. We're not at the design level of these things, but we're earlier than, well, that's my only comment. It's hard to approve something if you don't know what it actually looks like at the scale that the tip presents. And that's fine, and the tip works for getting it in the program and for seeking funding, but we've heard numerous times in the time I've been on the Planning Commission and before that, well, it was in the tip, it was approved, so we're done. And I appreciate your commitment to have that not be the case and to recognize that input is needed throughout the rest of the design process. And that's all I was highlighting, that is really key. But if there's one thing the public would want to know about, it's trees, I think, if I had to pick one. Camille?
Well, I think that just the ability to somehow model, do some modeling of what it would look like so people could visually, look at it and see what it would result in. Are there other comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, David
this is Mike. Oh, sorry, David, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. So Colin, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to see more emphasis on the program development for the project number 19, the mooring buoys. We have a lot of, super sensitive marine habitat here in the county, and I see mooring buoys as a great opportunity to protect eelgrass from from anchors and boats. And as I look around the county, especially during COVID, I'm seeing just a tremendous amount of pressure from boats out, and all these anchorages are just chock-a-block full with boats. And I know that the eelgrass is greatly impacted by all those extra boat anchors and chains down there. So I'd like to see that, like I said, that program, more emphasis on the development of the program, and I'd like to see that mooring buoy report that you mentioned earlier. And that's it for me.
May I follow up? This is Colin, Public Works. I'll make sure to get that report posted on the website if it's not, and then I'll share the link with the Planning Commission before the end of the day today.
Thanks, Colin. Michael, you had a comment?
Yeah, thanks. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the purpose of this agenda item is to make recommendations as required by law to the council on transportation projects, which are primarily around prioritization, funding, the description of the project, etc. Not the detail to which we seem to be going into. And I'm not sure that that should not be a process within transportation and the council to hold transportation accountable for the designs of these things in accordance with our comp plan and the desires of the community. So I don't know how deep we can get or should get in any of these when it comes to design, but I do want to know, similar to this discussion, is what is the guardrail, if you will, to make sure projects are done consistent with comp plans, rural character, etc. Does that rest with, who does that rest with? Is that the council or is that the Department of Transportation? That's all.
Colin?
I did hear the comment, and the question was, who does the design ultimately end up? Who's responsible for the design ultimately? Is that the question? It's
yeah, and the consistency with our comp plan, the direction provided in the comp plan for the way this ought to play out. Who's responsible for that? Because right now it sounds like we in the Planning Commission are taking some role in it.
And that's correct, is if you read the transportation element, and there's goals and policies in there, and I'm happy to bring that up on the screen from the current comp plan, but you would, the charge from the Planning Commission is to review the goals and policies that are in the existing transportation plan, look at these projects, and see if any of these projects conflicts with the goals and policies of the plan. So that's the scope of the work before you today, is to take the staff report that was handed to you, review the goals and policies, and identify areas of conflict or concern so that I can share those with the council, or you can. Essentially, I think you share those with the council directly, and I have to address those.
So down in your feeling is that this includes us being involved in design of some sort, not doing the design, but approving essentially the design's consistency with the comp plan.
I don't know that the goals and policies go to that level, but
that's what we've been talking about today.
Well, so on my screen, is my screen still being shared?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I got it.
So these are general transportation goals and policies, and none of these go to the level of whether or not it should be a 5-foot sidewalk or a 4-foot sidewalk, or there should be a gravel trail separated. I mean, that level of detail is not, and I don't think it is appropriate, is not articulated in the comp plan. So, the goals would be like promote non-motorized transportation. And so this project is creating non-motorized transportation. So that meets a goal.
But retaining rural character is an overarching goal, isn't it?
Right, and so rural character has, to the best of my knowledge, been the tact at which the other goals are implemented. And there's a lot of subjectivity in my experience about how that is, what rural character means and how you achieve it. And so that's an art, and it requires sometimes going down to whether or not a pedestrian light pole is 12 feet or 14 feet. And certainly that can't come before, it's just, I don't have that information right now. So I welcome any direction. I'm here to help you, give you the information you need to do your job. We start with reviewing these with the goals and policies and how you can say whether or not a project, this particular design needs to meet rural character. You can say what rural character means for this project. Maybe you look at the, for instance, this is the Pearpoint shoulder widening trail, and maybe you say rural character in this instance means that it's okay to just, can I get confirmation that you can still see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. So, here's walkers on Pearpoint Road, and the project is to create a walking shoulder. And I'm, like I mentioned, in particular, I'm struggling with finding a way to create a walking shoulder here that isn't just widening the road. And so in this instance, am I in conflict with rural character by just widening the road shoulder on one side? And that's a question for the Planning Commission. I mean, please help me answer it. Because if rural character in this instance means that I need to have a 4-foot green, or in this case it's probably a July photo, so it's brown grass, and then have a trail, that means that I need to acquire a significant amount of right-of-way, remove more trees, take down fences. I'm not sure if property owners would be acquiescent to that. So that's complex. And if an individual Planning Commission member would like to walk this project with me to better understand how I achieve rural character while creating non-motorized transportation, I certainly welcome that assistance. And if
Camille,
go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just our technological situation. Camille, can I make a comment to that? This is Tim.
Certainly.
Thank you. This is why I was asking the question, because when we get into the transportation element, I think a way to help approach this is twofold. First is to consider at the policy level regarding some of these issues, essentially a cascade of that starts with either most preferable and works its way to least preferable, and talks about circumstances in which it would obviously be appropriate to do something that we otherwise might not want to do. We haven't gotten as far as talking in the rural element yet, but as a practical matter, in trying to figure out how to make goals and policies to protect rural character, what you basically have to do is put in place provisions that prohibit or limit the adoption of urban elements or urban factors or urban characteristics or implementations as a practical matter. So you might start out with a situation where you would not want to do something. You don't want to have a curb unless. And then at least that way we know there's a process that works through this and the curb doesn't become a default. Or in the similar things, perhaps with sidewalk widths and things like that. And I'm not against sidewalk widths. I actually think if you're going to have one, make it wide enough to work. And we have a bunch in the county that aren't wide enough to work, really. And so to me, you lose both ways on that. So obviously there's a bunch of trade-offs, as Colin said, but at least if we've got some goals and can come up with a policy of stuff we'd rather not see unless, then I think we ought to say those things so that we can evaluate by that and provide guidance to Public Works and planning as well. The second piece I think we need to do is come up with some process enhancements to make sure that the public gets a chance to weigh in early on things of their greatest concern, and try and just make sure so that as I've talked about before, we get to a place where we're better situated to deal with the 11th hour panic. And which, if you don't know what that is, then I hope everybody here does.
Yes,
I hope.
I think so. Oh, well, you've made what I think are two strong recommendations that I think could accompany this to the commissioners. Should we?
Well, my suggestion. Sorry, Camille. My suggestion is that we work those into the transportation element, and we may want to give them a heads up about what we're thinking about doing in the transportation element. But like I said, I brought it up here because we had Colin. I didn't know whether we'd have him during the transportation element conversation or not. So didn't want to be out of order. Didn't want to interfere with people's time. So.
Well, let's be sure that we link those. Are there other comments at this time, or should we excuse Colin and thank him for his time?
Let's at least thank him for his time and effort.
Well, can't we excuse him too? Anyway, Colin,
sure.
For the offer to meet with you specifically to look at certain questions. Linda.
I just want to confirm, Colin will be sending a link to that mooring buoy report that does have a reflection in this discussion of the 6-year tip, where the other things might be going forward to the transportation element. That one does coincide with this discussion on the 6-year tip.
I believe that's what Colin offered by the end of the day. Is that correct, Colin?
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we'll proceed to the comprehensive plan training transportation element briefing with Shannon Wilbur and Senior Project Engineer and Christine Corey, Project. Are you both with us?
Good morning, Planning Commission. This is Christine, and I am here with Shannon. And I'm going to try and share my screen. There we go. Okay. And are you seeing my screen?
We are.
Well, some of us are not. So if you can point us if you're on a particular page in the staff report, or if you're going to be working through the PowerPoint presentation, we can follow.
Absolutely, we'll be right on the PowerPoint, and I'll remember to let you know where we are in the presentation.
Thank you.
Is the let's see, does the screen that you're seeing, is it full screen, or do I need to adjust the size?
You could adjust it, I'm sure.
Wait. But I was trying to see if I could figure out how to make it larger. But while we're going to call for technical expertise here to make it larger, in the meantime, let me just get started on the presentation. So in March of this year, we presented the draft changes to the transportation element, and we ran through all of our proposed improvements. Technical assistance should have improved your view of the screen. Did that help?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. So the as we talked about back in March, the DCD contracted for a review of the comprehensive plan as required by GMA, the Growth Management Act, and they developed a scope of work to update the comprehensive plan to look out to 2036. For the transportation element, there were 5 mandatory items that we were required to review. And we have reviewed those with you in March. And actually, where do I want to be? So the I have actually skipped down to, on the screen, you'll see I'm on slide 5. In slide 5, we're talking about the fact that we have previously reviewed the consistent format of the inventory, the demand capacity analysis, and ensuring that we have long-range transportation planning recommendations for each of the items in the Appendix 6. We've streamlined the appendix, and we've clarified how the wording looks in the entire document. So since then, we've made 2 additions to the draft appendix. One is to add a reference to the shore access, and another is to update the intersection LOS with the projections for the 2036. So during this presentation, our purpose is to review the new items that we've added since the March meeting, but also to answer questions about the entire document. So our strategy is that I'm going to present the information in the Appendix 6, which is the data, the inventories, and kind of the background that then inform the goals and policies of the actual transportation element. When we get done with the Appendix 6, Shannon will go through the goals and policies and the changes that we've made there. Any questions on process?
No, please proceed.
So one of the things that has come up in the last couple months is that there was we realized that we had not mentioned shore access as a marine resource in the transportation element. So shore access is where we might have a road right-of-way that ends at the shoreline, and those shore access points are used for delivery of people, vehicles, freight, and marine recreation. And we realized that it was important to make note of the shore access points, the importance to the community, and to make sure that we keep in the front of our processes the importance of maintaining those access points. Improvements to the shore access points could either be listed in the transportation improvement plans that Public Works prepares, or also in the parks. The capital improvement plan for the parks could include shore access improvements. Questions about shore access?
Yeah, I do have a question. I think it's very important that, and thanks for addressing that. But it is the suggestion that we should leave that to the parks plan, because it hasn't been addressed there previously, since a lot of those road ends and other shore access locations aren't in parks, and hadn't been their focus in that plan. So I think we maybe have a mismatch if we were to look to the parks plan to be our guide on shore access. Does the question make sense? Because
I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure what you're suggesting that we do differently.
Well, I was wondering. I was trying to figure out if there was a suggestion, because we don't have the ability to compel the parks to do anything in particular. We could ask them to go outside the boundaries of what they normally look at, to look at other shore access. But I'm not sure that. Well, we haven't had that I don't know. I don't know that that conversation has ever happened,
Right.
or if they view that as consistent with their directive or their mission.
Yeah. So we are acknowledging that some of the shore access points, actually many of the shore access points, are listed in the parks plan. But we're also acknowledging that there are some shore access points that are related or exist because of road right-of-way ending at the shoreline. So we are acknowledging that the shore access that's related to road right-of-way it could and would be addressed in the transportation improvement plan. We don't currently have any shore access points that we're proposing to improve at this time. So there isn't anything on the 6-year tip, but we want to make sure that we don't forget that that those opportunities exist, and we would add those to the transportation improvement plan if we were to make improvements to the end of the road right away at the shore. So the purpose of adding these words into the comp plan is to make sure that we do keep those in our priority planning process. Does that make sense? We're not depending on parks to be the keeper of those shore access. Public Works is aware of their responsibility to maintain those road ends that end at the water.
So
Thank
presumably,
you.
there's an inventory of all those road ends that someone could access.
There really isn't a map that shows all of the potential shore access points that could be developed at road ends. And one of the reasons that we don't do that is that in order to actually produce such a map, we would have to go out and confirm right away and do a survey to confirm what the ownership is of those areas. So we just develop them as becomes appropriate with the communities. So there's a number of places that have been developed, and when we develop a shore access at the end of a road, we go out and confirm that the easements are there and that we're not infringing on public property. So it's a pretty complete process that we have for developing end of the road shore access. But so we don't have a list that shows the potentials, but we just want to make sure that we don't lose track of the fact that those opportunities are out there. There are many of those shore access points that are identified in the parks plan, and some of those are shore access at the end of the road that are managed by Public Works.
This is Tim. Again, the limits of our current format. That's very helpful. I mean, the reason for my question it just has been that the way we've addressed these issues by reference to the parks plan and the way we've addressed shore access in a number of other situations related to land bank acquisitions and other potential shore access things hasn't gotten us where people would like to be. So in the comprehensive plan update, I wanted to make sure we understood that so we can think about a goal or a policy that triggers a review or triggers a question and doesn't rely entirely on the parks plan to get us there. That's all. So that's very helpful. Thanks.
So just to note, there already were goals and policies related to shore access, and they're in 6.5A7, and it actually says consider the inventory of county road ends that abut shorelines, which is included in the parks plan, and evaluate their potential for marine access, recreation, and other uses. So that is in the transportation element and kind of points us to making sure that as there's public desire for shore access points that relate to the county road ends, that we have it in the comprehensive plan to evaluate the potential for maybe some development or just designating it as a end of road shore access. So that I think the thing to do is to look at the goal and policy and make sure that we have addressed your concerns in that 6.5A7 and make sure that's beefy enough for what you think we should be focusing on.
Right, and that was the reason for my question, because that seems to indicate that we would depend upon the parks plan to get that done, notwithstanding the existence of other potential opportunities outside what's in the parks list. That was the reason for my question. So thanks very much.
So maybe we need to broaden that up and say those listed in the parks plan and others, and just others, so it's not limited to what's in the parks plan. We could do that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can look at that language. I just wanted to be sure that that's what we were talking about, and that the suggestion wasn't just to kick it to the parks.
No, we are acknowledging our responsibility for those shore access points.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions on the shore access or suggestions? Okay, the other big change, and we had a good discussion on it in March, was that we have proposed to add a new a level of service measurement, and it's the intersection level of service, and it's geared up to analyze traffic congestion in the urban growth areas. The two urban growth areas that we are looking at are the Lopez Village and the East Sound UGA, and we analyzed the intersections. There were 4 intersections in Lopez Village and 7 intersections in East Sound. I am on slide 7. So just a reminder that we measured the peak traffic. So they went out and counted cars at the key intersections at the peak traffic. And we talked a little bit last time about what peak traffic meant. It's a little different in Lopez versus East Sound. And we tried to avoid that short-term burst of traffic relative to the ferries, but actually in Lopez we saw ferry traffic, and it wasn't a significant change. It was included there. We did try and miss the ferry traffic in East Sound, and then we took the numbers that we had and we rolled them up into we took and adjusted for seasonality. You all know that with our traffic counts for our roads, we measure the traffic count at any time of the year, and then we have factors that allow us to roll that up to what we consider our average annual daily. The same kind of process happens with the intersection traffic measurements. So then once we have the number of cars going through an intersection, then we use the geometry of the intersection and the traffic volume that we measured, and we used an industry standard evaluation software that evaluates and predicts what the traffic delay is, so how long does a car have to wait at the intersection. And they do that looking at they identify the worst case of the intersection. So typically that would be a left turn off of a minor road onto a major road. That's the person that's going to wait the longest. And we look at how long that delay is going to be at that intersection. So if you're looking at slide number 9, it shows the Lopez as an example. And you can see that we've looked at the intersections. Take, for example, Fisherman Bay and Weeks. We found that there were 20 to 35 cars going through that intersection, and that if you look at that, then you analyze it, you determine that your wait time for any of those cars would be about 9 seconds, which is considered an excellent level of service, and no surprise that that our roads and our intersections are still operating well. The industry standard for a level of service for intersections goes from A to F, and level A is considered free-flowing, comfortable. It's an excellent level of service. Level F is where you have an intersection failure, and the industry standard for that is that greater than 50-second wait time at the intersection would be considered an intersection that should have improvement or is a problem for the community. Any questions on how we got to the A, B, C, D, E, F? Any questions on how we determined what the existing delay looks like? Matter of fact, I think I'm going to go to the next slide because, oops. Okay, so.
Yeah, Christine, this is Mike Pickett.
Right. Go ahead.
This is Mike Pickett. I've got a quick question. How do you consider seasonality? So imagine intersections are much more crowded in July than they are in January. How's that considered?
Absolutely. We did a survey back when we established our roadway level of service, where we measured traffic each month of the year, and so we know that March, and I don't have those ratios right handy, but we know that March is about 30% or is a percent of the traffic that we see in August. So what we know is that if you look at each of the months, we can take a number that's measured in March and convert it using the percentages to a seasonal annualized number. We did the same thing with the numbers for the traffic. So the traffic numbers were taken in the winter. We rolled them up to make them reflect what we would see on an annual basis during the year. And while we are concerned, we try and do our development and our planning around the average numbers, not on the summer peaks, because you don't want to build an intersection or a road for those 2 months. You want to build it for the majority of the time and have it work adequately for the summer. So your question's good. We did roll the winter numbers up to be an average number, but we did not roll them up to be a peak number.
Okay, that's helpful. So in a particular intersection, in March it could be an A, and in July it could be a C or D. How would you react to that? How would what would the department think about that intersection in general?
So we would be designing for how it looks the rest of the year, and we would acknowledge that it would take longer to get across that intersection during the summer. And I think that's what we see. So
Okay, great.
the answer is that we are going to design it for the majority of the time, acknowledging that it won't always be that short of a delay.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
So if we look at we're going to look at the current numbers, and then what we did since we last saw you was we asked Transpo Group to to project out 20 years on intersection LOS. And we used the current land use designations and population projections. They rolled that up into their predictions for traffic at the intersections and estimated the traffic to determine LOS. I just want to make a really strong point here that the future build out may or may not occur. And if it does, it may take longer than 20 years to occur. But just because we've predicted it might happen doesn't mean it's going to, and we're not going to design for something that might happen but doesn't. So we have in Lopez Village, all of the intersections are currently operating at LOS-A and are projected to operate at LOS-B. The East Sound, we've got a little broader range. We are currently operating in between A and C. North Beach, Mount Baker has a calculated delay of 21 seconds, still reasonable. But when we look out 20 years with the population and development that could happen in East Sound, that North Beach, Mount Baker could get impacted to the point where the delay would be, they're estimating 133 seconds. Now, reminder that is a possibility, not we don't know if that's going to happen. If it did, we would want to kind of be looking at that intersection and making plans for it. So you can see that the analysis and looking forward allows us to identify future potential problems.
Can I ask a question on that?
You sure can.
I hope this is the right time as opposed to when we're going through the language. On slide 14 is, I guess, the easiest place to look at that. And of course, it's also reflected in the draft. Obviously, the North Beach at Mount Baker Road is concerning and would be exacerbated further if sea level rise or something else caused us to need to close Crescent Beach Road. I mean, if we had to, if it weren't there, that would certainly put extra impact on that road for sure. And I guess the Transpo study says that it would also affect Lover's Lane at Mount Baker Road and Prune Alley at School Road as well. If something were to happen to Crescent Beach Road, the Transpo study also says that a school road connection to Mount Baker probably doesn't have much impact on this. I wasn't sure whether they were considering that in the case of a Crescent Beach Road drive closure. But more important, let me ask the other question, and I'll let you talk since we need to have longer handoffs, I guess. An A Street connection to Lover's Lane was recommended, was evaluated, but that seems like a terrible project because of topography. And I'm wondering whether it doesn't look as though they considered an A Street connection to Orion, however, which would provide another outlet.
Christine has a response.
So I would like to talk about all those connections, but before we jump into those connections, I want to make sure that we have an understanding about the intersection LOS and just talk a little bit about what the comp plan could do with the intersection LOS, and then we can go into those roadway connections. Would that be okay?
Sorry, I jumped ahead.
But to Tim's observation is that the intersection LOS allows us to evaluate a number of things. You'll see in the later slides that we did evaluate the impact to intersections relative to road closures. Intersection LOS can be used to evaluate proposed development inside the UGA, outside the UGA. It can advise the Planning Commission and the Council as to the impacts of changes that we might want to make in the land use and development. It also it allows us to look at what we want to do about intersection improvements in making sure that we keep our options open. So are there questions about, let me finish that what we are recommending is that in the comp plan, the transportation element, that we adopt LOSD, which would say that if an intersection, delay at an intersection exceeded 35 seconds, we would look at designing improvements to that intersection that reduce the delay time. And we want to make sure you understand that this does not mandate that we would make improvements. It just says that at LOSD, we evaluate our opportunities for engineering solutions to improving the intersection. There are a lot of things besides engineering that can be used to improve intersections. There's a lot of considerations that we would need to think about when it comes to pedestrians and bikes, alternatives like non-motorized, encouraging non-motorized traffic, or setting up different transportation strategies to improve intersection delay. One of those we would consider is engineering. Are there questions about the LOS? I'm going to go one more slide. So with the other note that I wanted to make is that even on North Beach and Mount Baker, if we were to get to UGA build out and we got to an LOS of F, Transpo Group has predicted that an all-way stop, so just adding a stop to the cross street, would reduce the overall intersection back down to where it would be a 16-second delay, which puts it back into a B category. So if the solution to our intersection problems can be simple, it would still depend on right-of-way and engineering design challenges. So we wanted to make sure that you realized that we weren't going to have to put in a stoplight, that even with what we're seeing, that we can manage the improvements without conflicting with the current comp plan. Okay.
When they talk about that stop sign, though, are they also contemplating a left turn lane?
Probably.
Okay, so that's a big difference. So, okay, thanks. Because it didn't say that.
No, they did not put that in their notes. So I am not sure whether they had a left turn lane or not. I think by requiring the Mount Baker to stop, you would then allow the side traffic to cross more quickly. So you would increase obviously increase the time it takes for people to travel on Mount Baker, but you would reduce the time it takes to travel on North Beach. So it would be a give and a take, right? But they did not note that there was a left turn lane there, so they may not have. It may have just been a simple stop sign. I could check that.
Okay.
So any other questions on the level of service, how we got there, what our recommendations are, what the impact of that setting at LOS would be? Okay, now we get to go on to Tim's questions about the potential road improvement options. So one of the things that I talked about was that the intersection LOS allows us to evaluate the impacts of different development. And one of those developments that we can look at is road improvements. And so we asked Transpo Group just to look at just a few of the potential transportation ideas that have been out there, either are shown in a sub-area plan, or are we're concerned about with in the case of Crescent Beach, we're concerned about climate change and sea level rise. So this is not a complete list of all of the possible changes that could be made to the transportation in the urban growth areas. These are just a couple that we looked at. In Lopez, we looked at Weeks Road. Do we need to make improvements to kind of that main feeder road in the village to relative to vehicles? And what Transpo Group saw was that there's adequate roadway capacity and adequate intersection capacity. No improvements are expected. They did note that we may want to look at future walking and biking improvements just to keep that flow going. And we added in, there have been in the past discussions about as development increases outside of the urban growth area, do we need another north-south connection? And their conclusion was that we actually don't. Just interesting. It doesn't, you know, like I said, these aren't the only things that we could do, but it does help us understand that we can evaluate these things. When we looked at East Sound, we selected just a couple of things that we had on the sub-area plan, had identified a street connection between North Beach and Lover's Lane, and it had also identified School Road going up to Mount Baker. We added in the Crescent Beach relative to sea level rise, because there's been a lot of discussion about what the impact would be if we were to, if Mother Nature takes Crescent Beach Drive. Tim, your question about the other connections, these are the only ones we looked at, and it points out that we can look at these things at a later date. So A Street and School Road, both kind of the same way that we saw the Weeks Road in Lopez. The connections are not necessary due to roadway capacity or intersections, but there may be safety reasons to consider those. And the school may still have a need to consider that alternative. But from a road perspective, it's not an impacted situation. The flip side was that when we looked at the impact to the roads for closing Crescent Beach, we did see that would not only impact North Beach and Mount Baker, but it also impacts Lover's Lane and Mount Baker, Prune Alley, and School Road. So it emphasizes the importance of Crescent Beach Drive and the consequences to the urban growth area if we were to lose that road. So these are just examples of what we can look at as a part of the planning process. Okay, Tim.
Okay, so Transpo didn't, so I understand now. I was trying to figure out why, and now I understand. We didn't ask them to. Why they didn't look at an A Street connection to Orion, which doesn't seem to have the topographic challenges and adverse topographic and safety impacts of trying to do a safe A Street connection to Lover's Lane, given the elevation differences and the short distance to address that elevation difference. Whereas Orion doesn't have that issue. And so consequently, I guess that we didn't have them do an evaluation of the impact of any of those other connections on their projection with regard to the North Beach Mount Baker Road intersection.
Correct.
Okay, but am I correct though that is it correct to think though that by adding another connection such as an A Street connection out of East Sound, whether that was Orion or perhaps Lover's Lane, although I think that would be damaging to the local character. But anyway, one way to address the pressure on North Beach Mount Baker Road would be to provide another way for folks to get out of East Sound and then having to use that intersection from North Beach Road. It's that left that's a problem. So if people were able to leave via A Street, for example, and then everybody wasn't channeled northbound up North Beach Road, then we might not have to put a stop sign, a four-way stop, on the busiest intersection of the island.
Agreed. And so what you're seeing is exactly the value in looking at intersections, is that when and if we decide to evaluate and for improvement North Beach to Mount Baker, then we would not only consider improvements to North Beach and Mount Baker, but we could consider how to limit or reduce the traffic going through that intersection. You know, I talked about the fact that the engineering improvements are only one factor in improving intersections, and the engineering has lots of opportunities. So we could look at before putting in a four-way stop, we could look at how else to direct traffic to reduce the left turns at North Beach to Mount Baker. So you're absolutely correct. This is just a tool. Intersection LOS is a tool to look at some of these options.
I was just concerned because, and Erica will recall, I expressed this concern as soon as I learned that this Transpo study was going on, and I haven't actually seen the study, but as I expected, they jumped immediately to the conclusion that we need to improve the intersection. That's the problem. And let's just throw in a four-way stop. Like, that doesn't matter. Of course it matters. And so we need to be trying to avoid additional traffic control mechanisms, even stop signs, because they adversely affect rural character. So they should be focused. They should be focused on finding a way to avoid getting a LOS intersection to be a problem. And I'm concerned because it had been my understanding. Of course, this is why we do the studies, right? That we weren't in a situation where we may have this problem. It looks like we could be here we could be to D even sooner, based on a variety of things at that intersection, which would then trigger this analysis. And if we don't have the data, then there's going to be extreme pressure to put in a stop sign, especially if somebody makes a stupid left turn and gets himself injured. So that's what I'm worried about.
So the LOS simply identifies that we need to do engineering. It does not say that you have to do anything. It just says that you're gonna that you're seeing that intersection is there's traffic delays at the intersection, and it triggers your starting to analyze it. Transpo Group only, there's a caveat in their report that says this does not include any engineering to resolve the problems. or reduce the traffic delays. It just says that, this is typically these kind of delays can be reduced if you were to put in a four-way stop. If you put in a four-way stop, this is the impact. But it has the caveat that it isn't comprehensive engineering. And if we got to a point, we're not there, that the LOS on that intersection indicates there's a serious delay, then we would start the engineering process to determine how to fix the problem. The problem, the LOSD does not tell you how to fix the problem, it just starts the discussion. So in the current plan, you could have it both. You can have an LOS set or not, and you can also say that and council also had similar concerns that they want to make sure that just because an intersection exceeds the LOS standard, that we are not held to installing engineered solutions that the community doesn't agree with. So
no, I understand that. I'm in favor of having the LOS because I think the triggers make sense. It helps the county avoid being negligent. It helps us try and stay ahead of the impatient person who makes the improvident left turn and gets themselves killed, which then would trigger a demand for other things to be done right away. We'll wind up with a four-way stop, if not worse. And that's the question. It looks from the appendix, or is appendix the right word? Anyway, hang on. Is it the appendix to the plan? It's the appendix 6. Appendix 6 looks like it's got a recommendation of what we should do. If this happens, put in a four-way stop. And that can't be what the plan says. We've got to try and avoid that, seems to me. And now we've got a report that says if we get to F anyway, it doesn't say anything about what we should do when we get to D. I understand that, and I haven't seen the report, and I hope it's got caveats all over it, so the county council at that point doesn't jump to the conclusion that to avoid liability, we got to put in who knows what.
So we are not intending to put that report in the, it's not going to be an appendix to the appendix. So the appendix 6 will just have a comment. I was just looking to see. So on page 38 of the appendix.
Yes.
It does state in there that the improvement necessary for all intersections to operate at LOSC or better is a four-way stop. So perhaps the right suggestion there is that we remove the recommendation of how to fix it, because that's not really necessary. That's not really our point here. I could see that would make sense to pull.
I mean, that's my concern, because we ought to, even before we get to F, when we get to D, it ought to trigger figuring out what else to do, and we ought to prioritize things that don't require traffic control devices.
Okay.
I think that's what I think from a rural character perspective. That suggestion, if we put it in there and it's there for a dozen years before we get to that level, is going to look like it's the recommendation, even though that's not what it is apparently. So, which is good. I'm glad that that's not what it is, but this is going to look like that's what it is.
So good. A recommendation to revise the wording on 38 and 39 to eliminate recommendations that could be perceived as solutions or comments.
Right.
Be perceived as solutions. I buy that.
Cool. The other question, I didn't mean to jump ahead to that either. It just the conversation sort of went there. What does it take to evaluate some of these other possibilities so that they can be on the table and evaluated? For example, I mentioned connecting A to Orion. I understand that's got lots of issues because there's Lavender Hollow housing development along there, and it also runs along the side of the Christian school. So there's folks who don't think that road ought to be developed for that reason. I'm not trying to mess up their neighborhood, but I don't see a better solution, since engineering-wise, getting from the end of A Street where it is up to Lover's Lane and creating a safe intersection at Lover's Lane looks like a whole heck of a lot of concrete and a giant ramp to me. So
typically we would start that analysis when there was an intersection that was reaching capacity. So as you said, that would kind of be a trigger at LOSD. We would start to look at alternatives, and that would be an alternative that we could consider. I don't know that we have a driver.
The reason I think we ought to have a driver earlier than that is to make sure that intervening events don't take away options. And that's the problem with the road, because you have to have right of way, and there has to be, even if there has to be right of way, and you can't get right of way if somebody puts a building on it.
Yeah.
So that would limit some of these other things that we would want to do and force us into traffic control devices. So we have to be planning now if we want to protect the rural character of the village and avoid having additional traffic control contrivances. So that's my...
I don't have an answer on that. I would have to talk to Colin and see how he sees that fitting into how that fits into the process that we're currently looking at for East Sound. So let me check with Colin.
Well, I think, Tim,
Thanks.
If I understand correctly, Tim, your point is you would like to be able to have analysis earlier on so that we aren't just driven to a solution that is an easier one at that point. Is that
right? At least to have some analysis so that we could make a recommendation perhaps in the comprehensive plan, or maybe even a goal in the comprehensive plan, to secure right-of-ways to keep the options open at minimum. Because otherwise it's likely that development's going to happen. At some point during this period of time. That's one of the drivers that's been taken into calculation in figuring out that the intersection burden is going to increase. So if the county is going to have any of these options besides traffic control devices, it's going to have to plan. We're going to have to plan now for it, or those right-of-ways won't exist.
Right. Okay, I will check with Colin and see how we would set up a process to do something to keep our options open.
Thanks.
Okay, where am I? Let's see. Okay, so we added in the long-range planning under land transportation that intersection delays will be evaluated periodically. If intersection LOS is degrading, intersection improvements such as four-way stops, turn lanes, roundabouts will be considered based on traffic flow predictions, intersection geometry, and available road right-of-way. What I'm hearing is that maybe we should broaden up what we're talking about there also to say that transportation options for reducing traffic through the intersection and or intersection improvements will be considered. So I think we could broaden that up so that it addresses that there are other solutions that should be considered at the same time.
well? I mean,
Yeah, this is Mike Pickett. Yeah, Christine, I think earlier you referred to those as non-engineering solutions.
Yep.
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, in the case that what Tim was talking about was rerouting traffic, developing an alternate route out of East Sound, which would reduce the traffic volume. So that would still be an engineering solution, but it would be an alternate solution to a four-way stop. So I think there would be non-engineering alternatives to reduce traffic. There could be engineering solutions to redirect traffic, and then there could be intersection improvements.
Does the transportation also consider remote parking? Ways to,
Yeah. Okay. I would see that as being a transportation and engineered solution, which would not be, another one that's been proposed is making it a walking village, right? Same idea as remote parking. If you reduce the number of people coming into East Sound, you would reduce the impact to that intersection. So I think non-engineering, alternative engineering, and intersection improvements all need to be considered, be triggered by when the LOS is degrading. And potential intersection improvements will go through the standard county project planning and review process. So, they would get on the 6-year tip, we would talk about them. It would not ever be a surprising event to have a major development like that. Okay. So just a reminder that the transportation priority planning process goes through the process of the assessments. So we go through our roadway condition assessments, we go through traffic counts, we look at annual complete street assessment, we look at the traffic collision data, we look at concurrency, and now we're just adding in that concept of intersection LOS assessments into the priority planning process. So what we're going to go on to now is Shannon's gonna we're swapping desks, so we had to do a brief sanitizing and moving position. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Good morning, this is Shannon Wilbur, Public Works, and I'm going to take you on to part 2. Christine just walked you through the updates to Appendix 6 of the transportation element, and the second part is Section 6, which has the goals and policies. And as she had stated, we had gone through both of these sections with you back in March, and presentation today is to go through any updates that have occurred since then. And as far as the goals and policies go, the updates have to do with additional public comments that we have received since the last time we spoke with you. And so that's what my presentation centers around, along with sharing with you any comments or revisions that we received from council when we met with them earlier this week. So to start with, we received a set of comments from the San Juan County Agricultural Resource Committee, and in most of those comments they acknowledged that these items that they had included in their letter are already included in goals or policies, but they wanted or in existing codes, but they wanted to make sure that they were emphasized by spelling them out in the transportation element to get them a bit more recognition. And so what I have done is taken the majority of those and I have developed new policies for that. And let me go through these and see if you have any comments on that. The first one being support safe and effective transport of livestock on the ferries. Now, this is something that is actually already included in the WAC, where Washington State Ferries does give preferential treatment to livestock, specifically for the San Juan Islands and the Cordes Run. And the purpose is to make sure that vehicles that have livestock don't spend an inordinate amount of time sitting out in the sun, particularly in those areas where we don't have reservations, which does happen on Shaw and Lopez. So it is included in the WAC already, but we did add it as a new policy in section 6.4, which is Washington State Ferries Marine section. The second and third bullets there were actually combined into one new policy, which is to support agriculture in the county by continuing to allow unrestricted movement of farm equipment and unrestricted driving of livestock on county roads in a reasonable and prudent manner, which is something we've all seen living on the islands. Tractors and hay balers going back and forth on the roads. And then, as you can see in the figure here, it's always a nice pastoral moment as you stop and wait for the sheep to make their way across. This is something that is already included in the county code, 6.0410, but we do have it in a policy, new policy now, to show that the county continues to support agriculture in the community. And then that last bullet, supporting integrated control of noxious weeds and an environmentally responsive practice. That is something that's had discussion in the past. It is included in current San Juan County Code, but in taking a look through the transportation element, it was located in two places and the wording was not necessarily consistent with what we had in the code. So the policy, a new policy has been put in to replace the others, which does reference the code to make sure that we are consistent and there can't be any discrepancies there. So that's how we had proposed to respond to the Agricultural Resource Committee comments. Any discussion on this? Okay, we'll move on then. This is a comment that came up from a number of folks on Orcas Island, having to do with a policy, a goal and policy that were added back in 2013 to create ports of entry on Lopez and Orcas. And before I go through it any further, I'll just have to share with you that the council did decide that this isn't appropriate at this time, and they did want to delete these two goals having to do with port of entries. That we have the international ports of entries on San Juan Island, and it was determined that that's sufficient at this time. So the recommendation from them was to delete the goals, which are listed under transportation financing and air transportation. And do you have any thoughts or comments other than that, or are you supportive of that?
Well, this is Tim. I'm very supportive of that.
Okay. Well, it will.
This is Steve, and I support that also.
Okay.
Michael and David?
Yeah, I think this is great. Unless it's needed, I don't see that it is. I'm in favor.
By consensus?
Yeah, I think we already have sufficient. David Kane here. We have sufficient port of entry in Friday Harbor already, or San Juan Island.
And that is what we had heard from the community, that it's costly and it's unnecessary, and what we have on San Juan Island is sufficient. So it looks like we have concurrence between the Planning Commission and the Council. So these two goals will be eliminated in the next version.
Madam Chair, for the record, then by consensus, the Planning Commission is agreeing to the deletion of goals 6.2.B.9 and 6.3.A.3 from the port of entry goals.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along then. when we had met before, there had been the discussion that we have received a number of comments having to do with climate change and electrification of transportation and general environmental issues. And we had been responding to those. One change is what has happened since then is the council is, I believe, nearing completion on their climate change resolution. And in looking through the transportation portion of that, it does encompass much of what we've been hearing from the community. So we have taken that resolution and we have either modified or added new goals and policies to reflect that. So as I go through this slide in front of you, it will show you how we're doing that. And then the next two slides will show you some of the comments we had received from the community. And that will show you that, yes, what the council had proposed with this resolution is very timely and is very responsive to what the community has been wanting. So, transportation portion of the climate change resolution does encourage telecommuting and teleconferencing for county business. And the transportation element did already have a policy similar to that, but it has been modified to more accurately reflect this. So there is a minor change in policy 6.2D under the communications section. The next three bullets are in section 6.2A, which is general transportation. So it applies across all the transportation all modes of transportation. And the first is that when feasible, the county will be switching to electric vehicles for their county fleet purchases as appropriate. And that would apply to, land-based such as vehicles along with marine. In addition, county will provide recharge stations at key destinations throughout the county. So that might be at the parking lots, at the ferry terminals, or at the airports, or in other locations, perhaps in the UGAs. So it's an overriding policy. And then, this next bullet, it's rather long, and in talking with the council, the decision was it should be broken up into two. It's got two different thoughts in it, and so we will be working to modify it. But what it says is to support and incentivize interconnected multimodal transportation options. And the suggestion was to stop that there, and then as a second bullet, say that the county supports the conversion to electric vehicles, buses, vans, shuttles, taxis, and other multimodal transportation options such as rideshare and rental programs. So we'll be working to wordsmith that bullet a bit more to make sense and to break it up as appropriate, still being in conformance with what the council was looking for in their resolution. The fifth bullet there is to request that Washington State Ferries prioritize the island service for electric or hydroelectric ferries. And those are new policies that are actually reflected in two sections. The first is in 6.4, which is in the Washington State Ferries Marine section. And the second is in section 6.6, which is where we talk about intergovernmental coordination. And so there are new policies in both of those sections to be able to reflect this goal. And then at the end, the last bullet there is the county to institute a policy of managed retreat for public infrastructure. And this focuses around adaptation to climate change with regard to sea rise and resiliency in the community with environmental issues and financially. And these goals and policies are listed on your slide there in section 6.2, which is general overall transportation. But there have also been policies added under 6.4 for county marine systems and 6.5 for land-based transportation. This is something we did hear from the community comments, that there is a lot of concern and interest that we start preparing for what is seen as coming up in the future environmentally. So what you see here reflects what's in the climate change resolution proposed by the council. And then let me take you through the next 2 slides to show you more specifically what we heard from the community within this area. The first is in the electrification of transportation, and the slide here does say Opalco, and as you would expect, they had a number of comments on that, but there were also a number of residents or community members who also had similar comments, which is to incentivize and support the development of clean electric vehicle transportation alternatives, to facilitate the improvement and convenience of low carbon mass transit, to something more like a hybrid electric, and to increase other multimodal opportunities such as car sharing, cycling, and walking. And then to facilitate remote working and telecommuting, to upgrade our communication systems to allow that better, and install charging stations throughout the county, in addition to supporting the electrification of all transportation facilities. So once again, these comments go hand in hand with what was proposed in the resolution and what we are now seeing in the transportation element.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The second bullet point appears to do a lot more than that. This seems to be the first. If this were adopted into the element, it would be the first time in which San Juan County would be making a decision to facilitate mass transit at all. And I'm wondering whether, well, I don't know. I'm opposed to that concept, and I think others are as well. If they thought about it, I'm not sure I know what it means, but it's very concerning.
Okay, this is a public comment, and we do have in the goals in section 6.5G, that is where we have the transportation goals and policies, and we do already say we encourage and support the development of transit and shuttles, and increase transportation options. So we do already have some things there. I think what was intended here is the encouraging the county to help turn these different modes into more carbon neutral alternatives, which is what we have seen in a number of the comments, such as hybrid electric. And we do have that type of a concept in the resolution trying to electrify the various transportation facilities. And I'll have to go.
Well, I know that there's a reference in 6.2.A.3L, support incentivized interconnected. I think that's the one you just talked about splitting in two.
Yes, correct.
Earlier. And that one does include in it talking about incentivizing electric vehicles generally. And then it doesn't say that, but it says vehicles, buses, vans, shuttles, taxis, and those sorts of things. That's a lot different than a mass transit system.
Well, and so what you see in the changed track changes version that you just referenced, that is what that we are recommending be inserted into the document, although we'll wordsmith it a bit more. What you have up on the screen are the comments that we received, and I guess the point I was making, we didn't do anything specifically for mass transit, but this makes it very clear that the community is ready for the county to start taking a look at electrification of transportation facilities.
Okay, I was concerned that I missed something, because to me mass transit is entirely inconsistent with rural character and ridiculous in a county of our size. But that's my personal opinion, and I just thought it might have slipped in, and it's fine.
Yes,
I have no problem with electric buses for people to have them, but that's a lot different than the county taking on a major urban expense of a mass transit system.
Yes, and there is no intention of doing that in this current transportation element.
Cool, thank you. I'm sorry, I just wanted to be sure.
No, this is Mike Pickett. I share Tim's views on that. When I read this, I had visions of large buses going through our 2-lane roads, and again, I think that's very inconsistent with most of what we wrote into the comp plan.
Yes, and I do hear you, and I do confirm that that has not been included as anything new in the transportation element.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so this next slide is actually, whoops, 1 minute. I turned off my screen by mistake. Okay, here we go. This next slide is actually not the one that was intended to be put in here. That was an earlier version. But let me use it just to. Their copy would have that. Oh, really? Okay, well then let me refer then. Christine just clarified for me that the paper copy that you have in front of you is the correct one. So I'm going to skip past that then. The one you have in front of you says climate change responses and environmental considerations. As I mentioned, we received a number of comments from the community. Certainly Friends of the San Juans, as you would expect, had a number of comments, but also other folks with concern to addressing climate change and being aware of that. And we have already proposed a couple policies that we had inserted that we shared with you the last time we met. And in general, we got support for those. And there was also recommendations about adding more to that and making them stronger. And as shown on the page in front of you, adding words like flooding and erosion hazards, in addition to sea level rise and storm surge, to make sure that we are comprehensive in our marine and our land policies. And also to emphasize resilience, which was also in the council's resolution, resilience to the community and environmental issues. And just once again, stressing that we should consider providing for managed retreat of our transportation infrastructure away from any areas that are impacted by climate change. And one example we have of where we're doing that now is at Agate Beach County Park, where the road has been reduced to 1 lane because the bluff is eroding. And we are working to move that road back so we can continue to provide access to residents and folks wanting to get to the public lands. And you heard about that briefly in Colin's presentation in the 6-year tip. So we are working toward that and having the transportation element reflect that for into the future. We also received comments with regard to Washington State ferries and upgrading our boats to new, quieter hybrid electric ferries to minimize, the noise in the water and make it more carbon neutral, and of course to ensure reliable ferry service. And those are things that were actually upgraded in the transportation element under the Washington State Marines section to reflect what they are listing in their long-term planning document. And you probably saw that the last time. So any questions about updates we have as far as the environmental and electrification type areas within the transportation element. Updates. Okay, I'm going to move on then to what we called fill in the blank policies, and there are two of them, unrelated. The first one was we got a couple comments from folks suggesting that we put in a new general transportation policy under the financing section where we would state a fund that would be used to fund clean transportation initiatives to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And there was actually a lot of discussion about this at the council meeting. And the council decided that this is really too directive. It had been suggested we could use lodging tax or a gasoline carbon tax. And it was decided that that's not really appropriate in this transportation document. As I said, too directive. What we do have in the document talks about supporting these types of initiatives and how, in general, how to finance things, but we don't talk about specific funds because that's determined through the general process and not in this overall planning document so that we can remain flexible. So council had recommended that this be deleted. And I don't know if you want to discuss that or if you have any other thoughts about that.
I think this is Tim. For what it's worth, I think that's sound decision.
Okay. Anyone else, or is everyone in concurrence with that?
It appears that that is the case.
Okay. Well, the next version of that you see of this then, that proposed new policy will be removed. The second.
One moment, Shannon, Madam Chair. So is that by consensus that you're agreeing?
Yes.
All the planning commissioners are agreeing? Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next bullet has to do with intersection LOS, which you discussed at length with Christine just a short while ago. And the proposal, which was accepted by the council, was that we go with an LOSD for the intersection LOS, filling in the blank there, although they also had some concerns, as was expressed by many of you earlier, to make sure that we look forward, and as we start approaching that LOS, we take a look at alternatives and figure out what options we have and take those to the community before actually moving forward with any improvements to an intersection. And to that end, the council recommended that we add a new policy. And if you were to look in section 6.5, which is land transportation, page 28 out of 35, in section C, it's land transportation level of service. And on page 28, you'll see item number 4 there, which is an existing policy that's been modified, talking about road LOS, which has been D and still is. But there was wording added to that we would perform a traffic study to evaluate alternatives to figure out how to increase demand capacity or decrease demand. And council suggested that we put in a similar policy for the intersection LOS, just to make sure that there is guidance there that we will study alternatives before we actually reach the trigger point of what we consider to be the extreme at the intersection. And I would think, based upon the discussion I had earlier, that that would be consistent with what the Planning Commission is looking for also. Is that correct?
I believe so, but let's just confirm that. Tim, are you Are you in accord with?
Absolutely.
Okay. David Kane,
Yep, I agree.
Michael,
Yes.
Steve Ruby,
Yes.
and I agree as well. So by consensus, we approve the new policy 6.5 C.3.
Thank you. Okay, and I just want to clarify, you're not, oh, yes, you're approving C3 as LOSD, and then you are also in support of development of a new policy stating that traffic studies will be required. And I'll work on that wording, but, so it'll be also another new policy.
That's correct.
Okay, great. And so that is it as far as the updates to the goals and policies from what you saw previously back in March. Those are the changes additional changes you have in your track changes copy based on public comments. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss or have questions on or would like to recommend?
Madam Chair, I have a number of comments.
Okay. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. The first is at page 4 of 35 of the element. What I'm wondering in the added language, it starts at line 19, which I don't have a problem with. I think that's fine. But what I
Excuse me, Tim.
Yes?
Could you give just a couple minutes for everybody to get to that page, please? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we're on page 4 of the.
Page 4 of 35 of the draft of the element.
Yes.
Of attachment A.
Right. Which line?
Attachment A to the briefing, I guess is what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
The language there at beginning of line 19 talks about prioritizing transportation improvements. And I think that's fine. What I'm wondering is, I think it would be good if we were to incorporate the concept from the vision statement on page 1 of the element, so that it's somewhere in a section and not just on the cover. I like it on the cover, I really do, but I think it would make sense if we had the expansion or construction of transportation systems, infrastructure, and facilities occurs only based on demonstrated local public need. Somewhere. In fact, I think that ought to actually be in a policy statement. But it seemed to me that it fit well with. It seemed to me that it fit well with this prioritization, because prioritization just indicates we're going to do these things, and the real policy is we're not going to do these things unless we have to.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree with you that this is an appropriate place to put it as we're talking in the general transportation section. And it makes sense to tie in the vision to make sure we have that incorporated into the body of the document. So yeah, I'll make a note to that, and I assume that will go forward as a recommendation to the council. And in the meantime, I'll look for how to do that. I think that's a good comment.
Yeah. So where we are at this point is what is the process? You're going to get our comments, and you've gotten comments from the county council already on this draft, right? Or was it prior to this draft?
No, it was just during our update earlier this week. So they're at the same point you are right now.
They're at the same place. Okay. All right. So then, do we need to itemize the recommendations, or will they just come up in the next draft?
I guess I would ask if either Adam or Erica are on the line, can you take a moment to talk about what the next step is after we leave here and we move forward with this and the other comprehensive plan sections?
That would be great, because I just want to make sure we get the whatever we have to capture in the minutes. I would want us to do it. It seemed to me that we were prior to the need for that, but I'd like to verify that too.
This is Erica. Okay, Adam, you want to answer that? You can go ahead.
It makes no difference to me. You're already going. Yeah.
Okay. This is Erica. We would hope you would give us some direction on where you were wanting to go with this. It's not your final take or stab at it. If you've got recommendations today that you've put in there, then we'll create another draft to come back to you at some point. The transportation and the land use element are somewhat related, and it could be that when you're working on the land use element, you realize that maybe there's something in the transportation element that you would like to revisit. So it's not a linear process. That makes sense. But to me, if you're still thinking of, so we'd like to get as much as we can from you today, and we'll create another draft, but it won't be the last final draft.
This is Tim. What I anticipate making some comments when we get into some of the other briefings, particularly about the rural clusters and other things that will have an impact on, well, actually that and the rural element that will have an impact and need to be harmonized with the transportation element. So I think that's why I was thinking if we were able to proceed today by providing Shannon and Christine general thoughts rather than try to get things wordsmithed down to something that we need a motion on. That would probably be expedient. That's my thought. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
I agree.
So you've already made some changes and he's agreed to some things. So my guess is what I just did with that vision wording, I just waited for the chair, of course, to maybe ask the Planning Commission if they were all in consensus for tying those vision words to that line 19 wording. Maybe that's just how we could proceed with just consensus on the ideas that come forward from planning commissioners, since we've already started it that way.
So let's start with this. Is there agreement that we would like to, the commissioners would like to continue with this addressing the transportation element before we move into the other sections of the land use? Is that, in other words, we've started by saying yes to the vision statement, or at least we're going to agree to by consensus if that's the case. Do we want to proceed with further suggestions, amendments in this area, in the transportation element? Tim?
I had organized my thoughts to address comments that related to elements that have already been incorporated in the draft, or questions that I had about elements in the draft, either based on further conversation or based on relationship to the changes that have been made, but not trying to jump ahead to decisions that we hadn't made yet regarding other elements. So I've limited the questions that I have that way. So I think it does make sense to go through it so that Christine and Shannon have a chance to work.
Okay.
As it's convenient, rather than wait for a bunch of other things that are probably going to be more focused and specific to some of the specific land use related concerns.
Okay. Are the other commissioners in agreement with that? David?
I'm in agreement. Yeah.
Michael,
Yeah, good with me.
Steve, Steve Ruby. Well, I'm in agreement as well. So I guess the first area for consensus would be inserting the vision statement on page 4 of 35 before line 19. Is that where it belongs?
I'd put it there.
Okay. Is there any objection to putting it there? Well, then let's see if we have consensus on that. Tim?
Yes.
David?
Yes, I agree.
Michael?
Yes.
Steve Ruby? Camille, I agree. So, all right. You have another or a series of additions, Tim, that
I have a series of questions. Yeah, the next one's actually on the same page, and I know this is an issue we had talked about, but I think we're making progress, and I want to revisit. And it's in the next little section related to concurrency, and on line 27, it includes the phrase there: unless transportation improvements or strategies to accommodate the impacts of the development are made concurrent with the development. That provision read with, if we jump up to page 9, line 31, which is, see, what's the policy number? I guess it's policy 4A.
Actually,
No.
it's 6.2B4.
Yeah, 2B4 little a, which says allow county roads to be improved by others with approval from the county engineer. Reading those two together, it sounds like we would lose the ability to deny a development request if the developer were willing to make transportation improvements or strategies to accommodate the impact. And the county engineer agreed.
I don't
Go ahead.
know that that's actually the case because the county engineer is guided by the transportation element. And so he wouldn't approve modifications or improvements unless they were in conformance with the standards and with the transportation element.
well, maybe it needs to say based on the requirements of transportation.
Because elsewhere in the policy, we made a revision last time that is still in the draft, which is, hang on. Let me find it. And I think I like it in the draft, actually. That was designed, at least my thought behind the recommendation last time, was to give us a way to not have to improve the roads or not have to allow the roads to be, and you couldn't see my air quotes around improved. No, where is it? Based on
Are you thinking maybe under the land transportation design and construction?
that's probably where it is.
Okay, why don't you go to page 26.
Okay, thank you. I have my hand on it, I think. It's definitely land transportation for sure. anyway, I can't find it, but I'm not concerned about that language. That language I was going to reference, it leaves intact that if a road improvement would be required, the development wouldn't be allowed. This seems like a inconsistency with that, and that's just trying to. Last time we were looking for levers to try and avoid the need to, trying to keep the county from being forced into making road quote improvements close quote based on a developer's desire to develop. Let me find it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember this discussion.
I'm wondering whether it's in the appendix. I don't know where that language is, but anyway, I felt that and my tabs are on things I wanted to talk about. Not that's why I can't just find it.
Well,
sorry. Anyway, my concern is that I want to avoid the notion that somebody can buy the ability to can force the ability to urbanize our roads so they can do their project, which is what this looks like it does. Unless we build in some standards that would help the county engineer say no, but and that was really the idea, that if a development would cause the level of service of a transportation facility to decline below the standards, we just don't do it.
Well, what the policy says now is if it appears any roads, and if we add a new policy, intersections were to be approaching the point of the maximum LOS, then a traffic study needs to be done to take a look at alternatives. So it doesn't mean that it would necessarily be approved. There are a number of steps that would have to be gone through. The traffic study, there's the permitting to be consistent with land use, and then any standards that we have in place to be conformed to. So there are a number of hurdles that a development has to go through before it would receive approval. And all of that is listed throughout the comp plan.
Right, but if we don't stop it here, the way the comp plan is generally drafted is to provide a way to allow development. It's drafted in a way, no criticism of anybody drafting it, but it's drafted in, if we take the transportation element, for example, it's designed to make sure that the transportation infrastructure is sufficient to handle the development, that the development doesn't put our roads in an unsafe or too low of level of service condition. It doesn't allow us to use level of service, though, as a check on the development at all, and allows anybody with money to come in and say, yep, we need a left turn lane there, I'll pay for it. Or we need a stoplight there, I'll pay for it. And pretty clearly, the public doesn't want that to happen. They want us to be able to we want some control over the creeping quote improvements close quote of our transportation system. They want to stay rural. And so
is the solution to remove that, allow county roads to be improved by others?
No, we wouldn't want that to happen. We want to have that option in there for a development that has been approved, because the county only develops public roads. So any roads in a plat, the county won't be developing those, although that they do have to meet a number of criteria. Tim, perhaps if you could, if you want to suggest some wording or some changes, and it can be reviewed between Public Works and the Planning Department to make sure that it's in conformance with, what we do have as far as our guidelines go.
Well, what I would do, what I would do is I agree that allowing county roads to be improved by others is probably a tool that we want to have for a variety of potential reasons. But what I would do is strike unless transportation improvements or strategies to accommodate the impact of the development are made concurrent with the development. But that probably goes too far because all I want to do is don't mess with the road. So and don't. I just want to avoid having somebody be able to buy their way into forcing the county to do something that our general policy doesn't want it to do. And that's what this seemed to do, because what we want to say is we don't want development that causes the level of service of a transportation facility, whether that's a road or a county, whether it's a county road or an intersection, to fall below our standard. And so we just want to be able to say no. And at some point then what that does is it doesn't necessarily cast the county in concrete or anything, either way in concrete. I didn't mean that. I meant that rhetorically, but it also works. Excuse me. In that case, what would happen is that the Planning Commission at that time and the County Council would just revise the plan to if they felt that a development had to happen, they'd revise the plan, but it wouldn't allow the developer to insist on it. So it doesn't tie the county's hands. It just makes county government fess up that that's what they're doing. Anyway, okay, that's fine. We can do it later. I mean, I won't lose that comment. I'll just make it on the next draft.
Okay, and in the meantime, we'll meet with DCD and talk through this and see. We want to make sure we're consistent with other elements. And hearing your concern, see if there's anything that might be proposed that anyway, we'll get some consideration.
Yeah. Okay, so that was my concern. My concern is just so it's clear to folks. My concern is not that we say you can never allow a private person to develop a county road if the county engineer is on board. I don't want to take that tool away. It's just read in conjunction. It seems like it would allow someone to do that. Okay, so we don't need to do anything on that unless somebody else has a comment. I'll pause. I don't want to dominate the thing. Not hearing anything. I think it is in 6.2.A, point 2D on page 5 of 35 that the complete streets concept is first mentioned.
Yes.
I thought we were going to come up with or include a definition of what we meant by that. And my continuing concern about complete streets is that the complete streets concept over the last 10 years has evolved dramatically, mostly for the better, and evolved to include a lot more flexibility and things that make it palatable. But in its original incarnation, it called for bike lanes and separated sidewalks everywhere. That was the original genesis of complete streets. It doesn't say that now. But I suspect that it will continue to evolve. And so it seems to me that some reference to either the ordinance that the county council adopted or some version of complete streets makes sense, because I don't think we want to adopt in the plan a rule that says we got to follow whatever the complete streets folks decide is what they want to do going forward. It's got to be fixed somehow so we know what it is we're supposed to be planning and designing in consideration of. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
so we're just looking for a definition of it.
Okay, and actually just to clarify, what is listed here is the definition of complete streets in that ordinance, and it is intended to give us a great deal of flexibility. And one thing the program emphasizes is that it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's very site specific as to what is appropriate, which is why we have been embracing this upgrade of the complete streets. What you might have in a UGA is much different than what you'd have on a rural road elsewhere. And so we can certainly reference the ordinance where this was adopted, I believe, back in 2018.
Because that would give somebody the ability to point to that and say, yeah, it's the complete streets concept as it existed when the county council adopted it. So next year, if they were to revert, we don't have a plan that says, okay, and now we're major urban thoroughfares everywhere because we said we were going to do complete streets. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I also don't know what they're going to do in the future. So just an idea of tying it down to the ordinance, I guess, is probably good.
Okay. Your comments acknowledged. I don't see any reason
No, thanks. That's
not
fine.
to do that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. The next one we have is on a question on page 6 of 35, and that is in little m. So that's 6.2a 3 little m. It
Yes.
says to monitor the development of driverless vehicle technology. I don't think we've had a whole lot of conversation about driverless vehicle technology yet in the county. I know we have vehicle-assisted issues, and that's helped by fog lines and fog stripes and other things like that. I'd want to propose that we not include that we include a provision instead that said that we don't intend to facilitate driverless vehicle technology. And the reason I say that is that seems to be a very highly urban concept with a whole lot of road maintenance issues attached to it. At least as it stands right now, the lines and reflectors and signals and things all have to be just right or it really goes wrong. And that just seems way crazy for a county that has a vision statement like ours of being rural.
I hear what you're saying. That actually was a comment that came in from the public. There was some discussion internally about it. And you're right, it's not something that's been discussed a great deal. And it was inserted. We can propose to delete it after having some discussion and see if the council approves also based upon Planning Commission recommendation. Because you're right.
Or at least flag it. Or at least flag it as a discussion item, because there are probably some folks in the county who like the idea and would like to have it. But it seems to me this makes it look more done. And if anything, I just think we should be sure we flag it for discussion. And I actually wonder whether some people understand what it means to have that happen, and what all the roads would have to look like if we were going to permit it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. All right. We will flag that and make sure we do have some discussion, because it is a brand new concept for us. That's for sure.
Okay. Cool. There's more. It's not like I have comments every line, so please don't panic. In 4, right below that, I would just recommend changing the order, because adaptation planning process is difficult to read, and I didn't understand it originally until I read the slides. So I'd say establish a planning process for adaptation of transportation infrastructure, or something like that. Just to move it so that adaptation modifies of transportation infrastructure instead of planning process.
Tim,
Okay.
could you tell me what page you're on?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 6 of 35. This is 6.2.A.4.
It's line
6
46.
of 25. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. If that it doesn't change the definition of the policy, but if it makes it more clear and easier to understand, can certainly.
Yeah, it makes it easier to read. Because as I read it, I thought what I'd seen was a typographical error that would have said adaptive planning process, but I understand now what it says. So anyway, it may be easier to read that way. So, Oh, well, this adaptation thing comes up in a few other places. Sorry, reset. Page 11 of 35, 6.2C, goal number 2.
Which line?
30. This is talking about ensure suitable mitigation measures for addressing the impacts of growth are fair and equitable. And it says, and the transportation impacts at the project and system levels are mitigated concurrently with the project. I think that's fine, but I just highlight it because it's related to that issue we started out talking about. At least it could be related, and I'm not sure. But,
well, it is under the level of service section, so I think you're right. It is related, and it kind of goes along with, as development occurs and there are impacts to the roads or intersections, we need to make sure that if there are improvements, it's not just the county that pays for it. It's the driver of those impacts also.
That's right. I mean, again, if we're going to allow them to do it at all. But yeah, that's sort of anyway. That's interconnected with that concept.
Okay,
yes.
So you're not proposing any changes to it. You're just acknowledging it and wanted to highlight it.
I just wanted to highlight it because this may be fine even in an area where we'd be doing it anyway. Because this is impacts being addressed, not necessarily. My concern is I don't know what's going to drive someone to propose that we widen the road or something. But in some cases, and don't get me wrong, I'm on board with making things safer for other modes of transportation because we're not, we're all pedestrians sometimes. So I think no. So anyway, I'll just keep an eye on that. It ties in with that other concept that I think is there. Now, okay. a general sort of concept that doesn't appear anywhere, and maybe it's because we've got some differences of views in the county, relates to I guess where I am. I don't have language to attach to this. Is on page 16 of 35. 6.4b, policies related to Washington State Ferry System. I think we've done a good job of making changes that certainly give the focus, or make it clear that we're talking about reliability and greenness and efficiency for the most part. But we also at one point in the past, had some conversation in the Planning Commission at least about whether we didn't want to say, hey, Washington State Ferries, we don't want you to increase capacity. And there's a couple places where this comes up. There are comments about ferry capacity and the impact on ferry capacity, asserted anyway, in relation to the vacation rentals issue. But we've talked about it in connection with tourism in general anyway. And do we want to increase the capacity of the ferries? And I don't think we do because we're concerned generally. We've had many comments in a variety of settings from people about the volume and the visitor carrying capacity of the islands and other things like that. Left to their own devices, though, we should no. Let's not say that. We should be telling the ferry system if we don't want increased capacity, if we want to keep the moat only as porous as it is.
Well, I guess the one item that might address to some degree what you're bringing up is on page 18, line 46, which is number 7B. It says that we will coordinate with Washington State Ferries to provide ferry boats in a vessel class that meets the needs of our county. So we have some input to that. We will work to coordinate with them as we determine what our needs are.
Yeah. Well, what I'm proposing is a little bit different than that. What I'm proposing is to say that we don't want it expanded. And I think there's support for that. I don't know whether everyone supports it or not, but it's a discussion point.
Michael?
Tim, this is Mike. I mean, the issue is in the summertime, lots of tourists make it tough for residents. And decreasing the number of boats or not increasing them isn't going to solve that problem, is it? So maybe it's someplace else that we need to talk about this, the ferry system and how we would like it to work for us who live here and work here.
Well, I think it might be both things. I mean,
Yeah. I think there's a difference between continuing to ask the ferry system to come up with some sort of a preference system for locals, and there's disputes about whether people like that, whether that's egalitarian, blah, blah, blah. So that can be debated. There's also a question of whether we want to continue the risk that Washington State ferries will increase the volume of visitors because they decide for whatever reason that a bigger boat makes sense. And then they're going to fill that boat, and they're going to even advertise if they need to fill that boat, at least based on past practice. And my impression is that, in general, the county doesn't want that to happen, based on the vision statement and many comments we received in the vision statement process, and protect and not being driven to take steps that would adversely affect the character of the islands. So if that's what we believe, then we ought to just say it.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say there really isn't anything related to that right now, specifically that item. And if you would want something like that, I guess I would look to Planning Commission discussing it and having that discussion with the community and with the council. I mean, that's a big picture item, and before anything is put in here, I would think we'd want to have some direction on what would be appropriate.
No, I agree. I agree because there will be differences of opinion.
Yeah, Michael.
No, I made my point. I think I made my point. I think it's more than just the number of ferries and the type of ferries we have, and it's because fewer ferries isn't going to make my life any easier. And yet, I'd like to make sure that we retain our rural character and control tourism. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm okay with where we are. Some folks would like to roll things back, but that's not what I'm suggesting anyway. What I was suggesting is just we ask Washington State Ferries not to increase it. And I'm not talking about the frequency or anything like that. I'm talking about
the size of the
number of cars per day that they can carry here. And they could do that a number of different ways. For us, at least outside of the summer season, more frequent, smaller ferries would be just fine for many people. I realize that's not likely to happen, but I don't run the ferry service either. So anyway, that's my comment on that, for just putting that out there, because the demand we're going to continue to hear in public comments is, what do we do? How do we cap this? And I think we all sort of want that, but it's kind of strange to say that we want to reduce the number of visitors and then not address how the visitors get here.
Yes.
So.
Right. Point well taken. So where does that come up? I mean,
well, I think it comes up in this same sort of place. I think it comes up somewhere in sorry, I'm lost in the track changes. It's 6.4B7, I guess, or maybe it's a new 8. I don't know, or whatever. Probably easier to make it a new number to call it out for consideration, but I don't know. I don't want to speak to that because I haven't thought it through.
So I'm just looking at policies, and at page 17 at the bottom, it also talks about another ferry terminal slip in Friday Harbor. I mean,
Yep.
It's throughout this thing.
No, but I think that's fine. That's just an additional way to have a ferry hang there and not have somebody tread water out in the channel waiting for the car slip to open.
But I mean, yeah. So this is Friday Harbor. I don't think Friday Harbor has that effect now. I don't ever remember somebody sitting out there unless some other boat is so late it hasn't left its spot. You know, this basically takes more shoreline, presumably. I don't know. I think this is a multifaceted problem.
Well, the crux of the problem is, do we want to limit tourism to the island in some way and have a discussion about that?
Well, yeah, yeah. And you know, whether that's a cap of an increase or whether that's some other level, there will be comments supporting making it smaller. I guarantee that. But I'm not saying that's what I think. So.
Okay, well.
Oh, so anyway, if not now, it's coming. So it'll be coming in comments. We can deal with it then. I just wanted to flag it.
I agree.
It felt like that slipped past last time, and I'm not saying anybody missed it, other than I think I had a note on it, but I don't know for sure I said it, so might not have.
Okay.
In section 6.5, goals, I think we ought to have a goal, and it can be incorporated into another goal if that makes sense, that mentions protecting rural character.
Which page are you on?
Oh, sorry, 25 of 35.
Road classification or someplace else?
I think it's just a goal under the initial policy, maybe an 8 or something like that, because we're going to be addressing some of the other issues in the rural element, and roads are a huge piece, at least in my personal opinion, of what drives impact to rural character, or drives the urbanization, urban feel. And so it kind of makes sense to have a place in the transportation element that's consistent with that. So we don't have to catch it now because we probably catch it later in a consistency analysis. But
well, Tim, let me just ask you though: doesn't goal number 2 go to what you're thinking of there, where it talks about the scenic qualities of island roads to maintaining them?
It might, but and maybe that's the place. Maybe that's where the edit should go. I bristle at equating scenic qualities with rural character, because I don't think they're the same thing. So I'd be fine if we replace scenic qualities with rural character. That would be cool. That actually is a great suggestion. Thank you.
So take out scenic qualities and put in rural character.
Yep. That's that would make me happy.
Okay, well, we can take a look at that. Rural character is a term that's used in the vision statement on the title page.
Okay, so almost.
No. The only, excuse me, Tim, just a moment. The only consensus prior to maybe doing this one is the one to put the vision wording. There's been no general discussion of consensus on the other items.
You're just raising the other issues. So the question is, this is very much more specific.
Right.
So
I agree.
The proposal is to replace scenic qualities with rural character on page 25, line, I don't know, 18.
No, yeah. Sorry, I closed it. 25, line 18. That's where it is, exactly.
Okay. Does everyone understand what we're proposing? And if so, is there consensus? And I assume, Tim, you're saying yes?
I hope we have consensus, yes.
Okay. David?
Yes, I agree.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree too. Good point.
Ruby, are you back with us? No, I agree as well. So by consensus, we approve that.
I have one other general comment, and it's not going to require a big voting thing, I don't think. It's just to make a note. We had the conversation earlier about the parts of the commentary in the appendix. I think it starts at 38 of 68 and goes on a little bit, of trying to limit that to the projection that's there, and as opposed to suggesting a two-way stop, or that there might be some others in there. I'm not sure. I focused on that as a conceptual piece.
Okay. Christine acknowledges that.
Cool. So that was it. I really appreciate, speaking just for me, and I hope everybody else, but speaking just for me, I really appreciate the work that's gone into this.
Yes.
And we're making, I think, very good progress.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you, Christine.
This is Mike Pickett. I would agree. This is excellent. The PowerPoint was well presented and easy to follow, and I appreciate that hard work. Thank you.
Yeah, I think both Christine and Shannon did an excellent job.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that very much.
So here we are. It's noon. We have managed to get through 2 briefings, and before us are land use and rural introduction, rural character, land use rural policy briefings. Do we take a break for half an hour or 45 minutes? And continue on? Be able to.
That sounds.
Tim?
That sounds good. I can go as long as we need to. I've already sent an email about an appointment, so no problem.
David, how's your time?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. This is what I'm doing today.
And Michael?
Yeah, so are you suggesting we take a 30-minute break and come back around 12:30?
Well, yeah, around.
Or continue going? I didn't quite understand.
12:45?
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
The
Yeah.
general request is until 12:45, so that's about 40 minutes from now.
I'm good.
12:45. Sounds good.
Okay, 12:45, we'll reconvene.
Okay.